Dear Chevra, I miss you. I pray for the time when we will be back together again, davening in the shul, learning together and growing together. At this time, our thoughts and our prayers go out to all those battling the coronavirus. May Hashem bring to the world refuos and yeshuos, and to all those that are alone, we are all together alone. I want to share with you a brief message on this Erev Shabbos HaGadol, 5780. At this auspicious time on the calendar, unprecedented in the history of the world and auspicious on the Jewish calendar, Shabbos HaGadol represents the time where we emerge as a people with a mission. And perhaps our very first challenge is the challenge of control. The mission of Shabbos HaGadol is to take the avodah zarah, to take the idol worship and destroy it. And while the practice of idolatry no longer rings relevant in our minds, the psychology of it should. And that's what I want to share. A perspective on control, as that being the source of the psychology of the idolater. You know, this time, as we read in the news, perhaps it's a theory, perhaps it's a rumor, but it exists in the world as the thought for the origin of this terrible magefa, of this coronavirus. The origin comes perhaps from a bat, perhaps from a pangolin, perhaps from both, from a market in the East. What does that tell us? What's the purpose of that? What should we here in the West do because of that? I believe deep in there is an important message for us. It's a message of a mission. It's a message of hope. And perhaps it is described by an explicit verse in the Navi Yeshaya, in the prophet Isaiah, in the 2nd chapter, which I want to explain. There are 3 places in Tanakh where the bat is referred to as an object. In 2 places it's referred to, in Vayikra and in Devarim, as an object of prohibited animals that we're not allowed to eat, creatures. The bat is referred to as the Atalef, according to Rabbeinu Sadia. The Atalef is referred to both in Vayikra and Devarim as a creature that we cannot eat. But it's represented in an entirely different context in the 2nd chapter in Yeshaya, in Isaiah. Yeshaya, we know, was a descendant of the aristocracy of Shevet Yehuda, a descendant of Tamar, according to the Gemara in Sota. He lived at the time of the very first exile and railed against idol worship, hypocrisy, and service to Hashem empty of sincerity. And while most of the Haftorahs that we read on Shabbos come from the prophet Yeshaya, many of which chilling like the Haftarah of Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av, we also find that he is the author of many of the consolations, the 7 prophecies of consolation as well. So he's not only a messenger of great challenge and change, but he's also a messenger of hope. And there's a pasuk in the 2nd chapter in Yeshaya where he says, as he's describing in that chapter, what will be ba'achris hayamim, what will be at the time of Mashiach, at the time of the Messiah. He says, Bayomahu yashlich adam es elile kaspo ves elile zahavo asher aslo lishtachavos lachbor peros v'la'at alefim. He says, and then at that time, people will throw away their idols of silver and of gold that they made to bow down to the moles and to the bats. What does this pasuk mean? What's the message here? I encourage you to read the Perek Beis, the chapter here. The 2nd chapter describes his vision of Achris Hayomim, of what will be at the time of the Mashiach. And he says, Har Habayis will be Barosh Harim, will be at the top of all the mountains. All eyes will be to the Beis Hamikdash. The Goyim, all the peoples of the world will say, Let's go. L'chu na'alel har Hashem. Let's learn midrachav, v'neilcha, ba'archosav. Let's learn the ways of the Torah. Man will be subdued. All the great wealth in the world, all the chariots, all of the horses will be of no consequence. And people will want to seek the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, and at that time, we will throw away all of our idols. But the last vestige of the idols are of the moles and of the bats. What does that mean? And if you take a look at the Mefarshim here in particular, take a look at the Malbim. The Malbim explains something fascinating. He explains the psychology of the idolater, and he puts in context this pasuk, which I think is relevant today as ever. He says that the idolater seeks to control his environment. If he's in the desert, he will pray to the creatures of the desert that have control. If he's in the water, in the oceans, he will pray to the Dagon, to the creatures that he believes, in his mistaken belief, that have control over that environment. Perhaps that's why the Egel Hazav, the golden calf, was what we sought in the Midbar, because we sought exit of the Midbar, and we needed an ox. We needed an ox to take us out. The Malbim says that at the time of Mashiach, when people will hide because of the fear of God, there's nowhere else to run. We're literally going to run for the hills, for the caves. He says people are going to seek to burrow in the caves, in the ground, and they're going to pray to the bats and to the moles, perhaps the bats and the pangolins, because they have control over those environments. That's a mistake. Ultimately, he says we're going to throw those away. Ultimately, we're going to recognize that we have to release ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, because God himself is the one that's in control. We seek in our lives to endow our lifestyle. We seek to control our lives through money and through activities. And we don't release our agenda. We don't release ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the message of Shabbos HaGadol. That's the message of emerging as a true servant of God, as a true Eved Hashem. Perhaps the last vestige, according to the verse in Yeshaya of Avodah Zarah, is the bats and the pangolins. Those people that will hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the last crevasse in the world. But ultimately, the recognition that we have no need to hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We only have to seek to release ourselves to him and to his goodness and to his kindness, to identify our mission, our individual mission, the mission of our communities, to be the light to the world. Through that, we will understand what it really means to be healthy from the disease of the idol worshiper. Perhaps that's the message of Shabbos HaGadol. Wayne Dyer was a self-help author, lived in Detroit, and died in 2015. He said, you cannot always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on inside. Perhaps that message is profound for all of us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bench us all with a good Shabbos HaGadol, a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. He should bless all of the world with refuos and Yeshuos, and may we all grow together. Good Shabbos.